Welcome back to another Clear Creek Golf Cart Leadership School. In today's episode, Nick Rousey, our Rogers, Arkansas store manager, is interviewing his longtime friend and mentor, Steve Bobe. Now, Steve is a retired PGA professional, and he spent most of his career leading the Navy's golf course in Pensacola, Florida. So let's dive in and see what wisdom Steve has to share with us about leadership.
I appreciate you doing this. And just for our team with Clear Creek, give us a little bit of like your background, like before, just a little bit before you got into the PGA, when you got into the PGA, your job's kind of in the PGA.
Here I go, 15, I go to work for this guy named Bob Hill at Easy Rent, and I am cleaning equipment and learning how to, empty tar kettles and do these kind of things. Bob kept saying that when that car drove on that lot, that was the most important thing to do. The equipment had nothing. You drop everything you're doing to make sure that customer is satisfied. And he motivated me to, keep moving forward, and that your abilities to work with others, manage the customer, operate and understand the internal operations through a lot of his guidance and training and stuff was important. Fast forward 1980, November 1989, Tim Cahill asked me to come up to Musgrove Country Club and get into the golf business. It was a private country club, and you had to manage those 400 members that were there, and that was the most difficult thing that you ended up doing, you thought. The most difficult part was to keep employees moving and keep them happy that they understood that same situation. So we sat down, we wrote some procedures and some policies for our employee to understand what he was doing and those kind of things. Left there in 1992, went to Stonebrook Village, got the chance to come back to Pensacola, where my family is, and stayed there 5.5 years working for Hiram Cook and Charles Daniels. That was a very unique experience in that there were two brothers who started the business. I tell the story 3 weeks into the job. I had noticed, basic management tells you 101 that thou shalt have one boss. And I was going out setting. There were no policies in place, no procedures. I was writing stuff in. I'm managing. I'm moving things. I'm telling people what to do, what things I want to see done. And you go 2 hours later, you go out there and they're not doing it. And you go out there and say, well, what did you do? Well, Hiram came by and told me I didn't have to do that. So 3 weeks into the job, Hiram and Charles were sitting in their office, and I walked in and said, Hiram, you're going to have to stay outside and stay out of the operation. So here's the problem. These kids need one direction, one boss, one understanding. And you and Charles need to talk about it. My job is still open at Musgrove Country Club. If you don't want me here, I'll move. But y'all got to talk it out. And I had said things to Charles before that. So I closed the door. Hiram came out about 45 minutes later, mad in a polecat, and didn't talk to me for a month. And I don't think today he's probably hadn't said 40 words to me. He did get he got, as he put it, the last blow on my last day when the buyout came in April. He pulled me into the office and he said, do you remember what you did 5.5 years ago? You came in here, you hadn't been here 3 weeks, and you stand there telling me I run this organization. I wanted to just fire you. I said, you should hire him. I told you to. You should have cut me loose. I'd have moved on, and yeah, we would have been, you'd have had your operations. I'd have gone back to Musgrove and life would have pressed on. But we did get the organization in line because we got the policies and procedures in place. We set the goals, the budgets in place, and got the little organization up and running. Charles commented every so often, is this really necessary? I said, how do you think this is working so well? Why are we being so successful? Mike Genovese came in. I hired him as an assistant, and so that went well. The buyout happened April 1st and got laid off, and around August, the the job came open as head professional at the Navy base.
I know so much of this story. I actually, one of my questions I thought about asking, because I knew I knew it was difficult at Stonebrook with two bosses, and they were, from what I remember, completely opposite people.
Exactly.
So, and I didn't realize, I never knew how rocky the relationship was with Mr. Cook, with Hiram type of deal. But for you, this is just kind of a sidebar question. I was just thinking about listening to the story. How did you, when you have the rocky relationship with your boss as an employee, how do you come to work and try to keep it as cordial as possible?
The way they knew the structure needed to be a golf director, someone overseeing the whole operation, owner Charles Daniels. I had professional to run the golf operation. Charles kind of kept the right of ways going, kept up. So he became the buffer between Hiram and me. Hiram, he was an outdoors person. He enjoyed the greens side of it, the greens maintenance side of it. Not only did he put all 10 sections of the roads in and sell 600 lots in that subdivision. Scott Clark was our superintendent at the time, and he stayed on him and with him. So I think knowing that when you are in those environments, look at what your layers are doing from above you and find that person that gels with you and that you gel with them. And sometimes that's difficult because in smaller operations, there's only one person. For instance, let's just back up. Let's just say Charles wasn't in the picture. It would have just been me and Hiram, and probably the forced conversation after 3 weeks of being there, had Charles not been there, that conversation still would have happened. I still would have done it because I needed him to understand why he had hired me. Why was I there? What was my goals, to better this company? Had Charles not been there, I would have had to sit down with him and say to myself, okay, then let's get on your side. You're the owner. You still have all the wheeling of the power. Get a piece of paper out and tell me exactly how you want to get this thing done. And let me learn something. Maybe it was something I could learn from him. See, Hiram's 9 years older than me, so he had been in the industry for a while. And approach it that way, go into it, knowing that I'll learn something, we'll make a better team out of this thing, and the whole goal going forward will be to grow the business and get the business and the customer happy. So that would have been, my thought process had I not had a Charles Daniels in front of me. So it was an interesting time because when I got up to the Navy base to get that job started, of course, they're numbers driven. They were numbers driven, which I enjoyed. I enjoyed that aspect. Hertz was numbers driven. Hertz had a standing policy that if you lost money 3 months in a row, they fired you. So yeah, go to work with that pressure on you for, every day. When I opened Hertz Equipment Rental in 1978, I still remember the saddest meeting I went to. I was in Nashville, Tennessee, and the store manager over in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, had lost money 3 months in a row, had no control of his own. It's just the oil and gas industry was tanking, and those refineries were cutting back and shutting down. And the president of the Hertz Corporation was Jose Menendez, and that is the Menendez twin. The Menendez brothers that killed their mom and dad. That's him. It was Jose. He was an immigrant from Cuba, photographic memory, phenomenal guy, very harsh man, and just flat out told the guy, he got up there on the stage and they were throwing the screens at him. He said, stop. You've lost money 3 months in a row. Go close up your briefcase, get on the plane, go back to Baton Rouge, give the keys to your, there's 48 managers in this room. Fires him right there on the spot. And he's mad as poker. He's slamming his hand down on the desk, and he goes, okay, who's next? Pensacola. I thought, great. I get to go get in front of them. You know, I was profitable. I mean, we were rocking and rolling, but it was I felt so sorry for that guy. But anyway, that's a tough way to manage. That is a very hard way to manage.
One thing that I've always been amazed, all the times that we have spent together, the way you are with people is incredible. Like just the way you handle everybody, situations. You know, I remember, and with, you know, and I won't use names, but you had the employee that was a very religious employee, right? When you first got to the base, and then he, you know, he was really a distraction to the team. If I remember right from your stories, like he was very difficult. And I don't know if it was your boss told you needed to talk to it, or if you just decided it's time to have this discussion. But at the point he had litigation, I believe, toward the Navy.
Third one. We were in the third litigation.
Yeah. And you know, and just knowing you got to have that difficult conversation, knowing, you know, in the government you can't just go and eliminate a person. Like you just can't go fire somebody. It's not a right to work state type of thing. Like there's got to be so much documentation with it. And I know you had another difficult employee that wasn't your favorite in the pro shop that was there for a long time also. Type of deal. And so how did you with like, how as a leader do you handle those situations and yet know that, like, I don't know anybody in town that ever speaks poorly of you, you know, and you might have like with hiring you butt heads or whatever the case may be. But I mean, you have everybody who works for you and is around you respects you so much. And how do you have those situations where you have to be a leader, you know, a boss at that point, but still treat people as a human, to where they might be mad in the moment, but when the dust settles, they're still like, wow, that was handled really well, or he's still a great guy, that type of situation.
To finish that story for the masses, my boss, I mean, I had been, you know, King had retired and I had been in the operation for about 2 weeks, and my MWR director told me to go set him down. He's in his third litigation and we got to get this problem resolved. So I went back up there, walked in back, he was working, and I asked him to come into my office and wanted to talk to him. He said, well, I didn't bring my tape recorder and I can't talk to anybody in management without my tape recorder. I said, okay, but today, because you don't know me, I don't know you, we're going to go in there and have a conversation. So come on. I said, I'll leave the door open if you're that concerned about it, but we're going to go in and talk about this. And, you know, it's confrontation. And a lot of people don't like confrontation. They don't like to manage through it or anything else. So, and I brought him in, sat him down. I said, you know, he was nervous. He sat up on the end of the chair and he said, you know, I said, you tell me what the problem is. It's got to be in a nutshell. You're on your third lawsuit trying to get this thing through it. And he said, I'll tell you what it is. He said, you know, I'm frustrated that those other cart attendants can sit back here and read, you know, Hot Rod magazine or Golf magazine, you know, they can do their homework, which has been a great thing to be doing while you had downtime, as everything else was done. He said, but I want to read my Bible. I want to set myself in position to have my Sunday school lesson done, because I teach Sunday school on Sunday mornings to, you know, 8 and 9-year-olds. And they told me I could not do that. And I think that's probably one of the biggest driving points. And I said, okay. I said, if I solve that problem for you right now, will you drop the lawsuit? He said, how are you going to solve that problem? I said, I'm going to let you start bringing your Bible, bring your Sunday school stuff. You can sit back there, but you got to promise me one thing. He said, what's that? I said, you can't preach to people. If they ask you what you're doing, they just open the door. And under the law, you can talk all you want to, but you can't preach to them. And because I don't know you. You know, from that point on, he was still with me for about 4.5 years. And we literally didn't have another peep or squeak problem out of him. he dropped the lawsuit. He moved forward. He ended up going to work for the Escambia County School Board in the maintenance department, and he's still with them today over there. Confrontation, a lot of people, struggle with it. If you think through it correctly, I think that's one of the keys to how to manage it correctly, is to understand all the angles that you can, from their side of the story to, your side of the story with what management is requiring and wanting you to be doing. And then, working in from there. And confrontation goes all the way from that internal side all the way to the customer side. You've got those customers, you've been there, that, they think that golf course is theirs. They want to drive 3 inches from the edge of the green and step off the cart and go putt, and not understand why that's a problem. So,
especially when you have a retired flag officer that everybody bowed down to, when he was in service, and now he's a civilian. You're just like me and you, so he's no better.
He isn't, and one of the things that my MWR director for 20 years, who I'm talking about, having been retired military for 21 years, retired 2005 when he left that and then went into the job. I can remember his first meetings with all, 26 managers that for the different departments, and telling us that we were there to support those 15,000 active duty people on that base. And I don't care if it's the E2 all the way up to the 3-star that's sitting here on this base. We treat them all equally. You've got to learn how to do this and manage it correctly. And a couple of people who'd been here longer than Steve said, how do you tell a 3-star? How do you treat that 3-star the same way? He said, the rules are the rules, Steve. This is the military, So, and it was one of our driving forces. I try to make sure everybody understood, especially that one difficult supervisor that I had when I first got there for 5 or 6 years that your dad had to deal with it. He having spent, 30 years in the military, he understood it, but he understood that 3-star had a lot more pull than that, E3, E4, and he didn't care,
Right.
It just, so that was the challenge, to keep him in check too, and keep him in place. And thank goodness Gary had a great attitude, and, to be able to work it where he understood what we were trying to accomplish, and making sure that we were all on that same page and that same goal.
How did you go about recognizing your high performers and your low performers? How did you notice them? And then how did you motivate to get more out of the low performers or help encourage them, just so you can help achieve, the overall goals that you had, and then being able to get the golf course in the shape, that it eventually got in once you were able to eliminate the superintendent or that you previously had, and bring in the correct guy, the right guy for the team, and move on from there.
You have to delegate in that position, and you got to make sure that delegation is in a place where they can bring those troubles and those issues to you. For those low performers, for instance, Gary was doing cart attendance and stuff. He'd come to me several times, and say, here's this, and this. If I bring them in my office, then, I hear your side, I'm gonna hear their side, and then they come in, and you listen to their side of the story, and you remind them that that's going, totally against what this team is trying to put together. So we either got to change your position in this thing, or tell you up front, you probably need to start looking for somewhere else to go to work that you feel like you can take your concepts and your ideas and better that business. But you can't take that here. You can't let it fester. I would tell my management team that, in our weekly meetings, bi-weekly meetings that we would have is, who is the trouble? Where's this person going? And then if that point that you haven't been able to handle it, bring them into my office. And we all sit down and talk about it. And of course, I had them stand up and cuss me out and tell me to take a hike and go clock out and go home. But the problem went away. And it went away because they made that decision, not me. And I think that's one of the key things, is to make sure that they understand that, what they're doing and what they're trying to accomplish is their position. If it doesn't go and it goes against us and they still want to resist, they need to probably go find something else to go do.
Great to hear you say, like, instead of like, okay, this is where we are, and we're not going to force you to do that. Like, if you can't get on board, then we need to break ties right here and there. You're free to work here and just let's find another, give you 2 weeks or whatever, however you would handle that. But I think that's great, as opposed to, I think so many times you sit there because you're worried about the hole that it would create if that person leaves. Now you go, or going through the hiring process, because that always is difficult.
Right.
Because it's hard to find the right fit. At some point they're not on board, and it's just like, hey, this is probably best if we move on for both of us.
Right. And don't ever do it in frustration. I tell this story. When I was 16 years old, the manager of Easy Rent, he was difficult. And of course I was basically, your cart attendant. I was washing machinery and this kind of stuff. And one afternoon he came up and he put his feet on top of my feet. Now picture how close that is, because he was going to drive a point home, and just my immediate reaction was, I hit him in the chest and I knocked him backwards, fell onto the ground, and he jumped up, and in that fit of rage, he fired me. And I said, okay. So I go in and get my stuff, and I walk across the yard over to the office and open the door up. The owner, Bob, was standing there. He said, what are you doing here? I said, I just got fired, and here's what happened. So he heard my side of the story. And he said, okay, go over to the break room, sit down, I'll be right back. And 15 minutes later, he came back and said, go put your stuff back in your cubic thing and get back out there and go to work. So I spent the afternoon working, and come 5:30, it was time to close. And the manager walked up to me, put his arm around me, and said, I need to apologize to you. I said, okay, I accept your apology. I didn't mean to hit you. It was just it was that reflex reaction, of somebody that close in your space. And he said, let's start working together. And he said, I'll coach you better. I'll work with you better. I'll manage you better. And away we went. From that point on, he was a great guy. I mean, the year and a half he stayed there. You don't ever, you don't do anything in knee-jerk reactions. Always, take those seconds to count to 10, walk away, do whatever you got to go do. And then, make sure you've gathered all the information on all sides, and then, those tough decisions have to be made at times. You're right. Set the employee down and tell them, here's the counseling session, and I'm not happy, and I think we're going to part ways. You just don't see my vision. You don't see where I'm going with this and what I'm going to try to accomplish with this, and away we go.
In your time, also, you faced a lot of challenges, be it Hurricane Ivan, Hurricane Sally, I think it was, or
right.
Where you lost, golf course gets destroyed, and then December 6, 2019 happens, where there's an active shooter on base at the school, which is less than a mile from the golf course, where 3 sailors were killed on that day, and you had the police officers to take down the active shooter. And so, that's a life-changing challenge. How do you manage in those situations? How do you help the employee to feel comfort, know that everything's going to be okay, but I still need you to do your job. I still, we're still paying you to come and do this, but we are here for you.
Let's go to the shooter. on December 6th. One of my employees' mother was shot. She was in that building. And the need for this girl, she was first year college, so she was 18, 19 years old. Her mother's been shot. She was not at the office that day. She was not working on the schedule that day. So she got up to the hospital with her mother. She called me the next morning and told me what had happened. And of course, facilities closed. We were closed for 4 days. Essential personnel only were required on the base. And so we finally got the thing open. She came over and talked to me, and I mean, she shook. And she's got several of her friends that are employees at different places, at the gym, at several things. And I said, my best advice to you is keep praying, that your mom's going to get through this. The great doctors and nurses at that hospital pulled her through. You just need to take the time until you get yourself settled emotionally and physically, that you're ready to come back. We'll cover your hours. We'll find people that can make this thing work. And she took a good week to 10 days before she called and said, put me back on the schedule. Yeah, you have to be sensitive to what those, needs are. To what people have got to do. They've got to secure their families. They've got to be able to secure their, their state of mind to be able to come back and function. Because you sure don't need it back. And then all of a sudden you're the responsibility, or you're the reasoning, I guess, more so that they didn't get into a functional position because they came back too early, kind of a thing. That's part of why we, manage, get in, engross yourself in all the different facets and the avenues and the things that you want to see done, get done, accomplish, and those kind of things, and go have fun. I mean, there's this is eating up 8, 10, 12 hours of your day. You need to go relax and have fun with it. Make it as enjoyable as you possibly can.
That's great advice, especially when you like you said, you spend 8 to 10 hours, in season, you're there 10 hours with the job for you and for us, just because of customer service business, you're in it to take care of the customers. Kind of finally, and this is, a personal thing for me now that, I'm immersed in this. I played golf for 16 years, so I didn't really understand. Thought I did, but I had no clue what, like you or my dad, kind of went through on a daily basis. But now I got a job, and I get it. But for me, I got 4 kids, and we got a new house that has property that I need to build, to work on. The more I think about it, the more impressed I am. Like, you not only did you work 25 years at a Navy base where you had, you're answering to your bosses and you're managing all your employees. How many employees did you have at the base?
Averaged between 65 and 75, depending on the season.
Okay, so yeah, you're managing 65 to 75 people. You're there. You're also giving golf lessons to the people, and then when you step away from there, you're involved in your church. You were involved in junior golf. You helped start the first tee, and you were on the executive board for the first tee in the city. You were involved with FCA. You had 2 children that were growing. Your son's playing golf. Your daughter was into a bunch of different stuff also. And then on top of that, you and Kim went through the training to become foster parents, and you fostered numerous kids, especially the twins, which, you were very active in helping them get adopted and stuff like that. And then you built a house. And I don't mean like, I say that I built a house because I dealt with a general contractor and dealt with the tile guy and did all this. Like, you actually hand built your house. You framed it, you laid the tile, you ran the wires, you put in the air conditioning, like you did it all yourself, y'all's dream house up in Pace. Like, how did you do all of this yet work your job and be motivated to go to your job and put your best effort, like showing up every day and I'm going to give it my best at my job, but knowing you have these other interests and other things that pull at you outside of your job?
God gives us the same 24 hours, and it's how you take it and run with it, and how well you manage that time, and not lose sight of the fact that you're trying to better something. I mean, none of this stuff had anything to do with me. I mean, I was trying to get things done for other people, which is what the service industry is about, playing golf and the rental business. And, if we lose sight of what we're trying to do, we're out here to help. We're out here to help others. And if that means, renting a chainsaw to them, or, getting a golf cart for them, or, doing a maintenance cart sale, or whatever you're trying to do, trying to make something go for them, and the success is there for them. And I never really looked at a lot of it that I was trying to get something done. I just didn't see it that way. I saw it that I was trying to help others.
Man, I can't thank you enough for wanting to do this and sit down with us. And it's always great to see you and catch up with you. And I am sorry I did not call enough on my end, but I greatly appreciate you doing this for us and providing me and my team with some of your wisdom. It was awesome.
I appreciate you asking me to do it.